So I get asked all the time by people, are we in a housing bubble? And I'm going to answer that in a different way starting right now. So stay tuned. So welcome back to another episode of Your Wichita Falls. And on this channel, we talk about all things Wichita Falls. My name's Debbie Dobbins, and I'll be your host for this episode. And we're going to start talking right now about that question, are we in a housing bubble? Because inquiring minds want to know. Well, that question of whether the real estate market is in a bubble ready to pop seems to be dominating a lot of conversations. I hear all kinds of theories. And I also know that after being a little bit older than some of you, I've seen a lot of ups and downs in the real estate market. And there are peaks and there are valleys. But the fact is that we are not like we were in 2008. And I've said that several times. So let's take away that memory for a minute, because in these conversations, everyone has an opinion about what a bubble looks like. But when it comes down to it, the opinions that carry the most weight, not the supposition, not your experience in 2008, not your experience with how your house deals went, but the most weight are the ones based on experience and expertise. I'm here to tell you I've had a lot of experience. I'm pretty much an expert on a lot of things, but there are some other experts. There's 4 expert opinions, actually, from professionals and organizations that have devoted their careers to giving great advice to the housing industry. So, first of all, the Joint Center for Housing Studies in their state, the nation's Housing 2021 report said, conditions today are quite different than they were in the early 2000s. And I've talked about that on several videos, but the differences is that we had a nutty lending market. So that caused a lot of things that are not true of this market right now. The loans that are being made are sound right now. So that makes a huge difference, because in the early 2000s, in terms of credit availability, oh my goodness, I was in the mortgage industry and got out because I watched, if you had a pulse, you got a loan. That meant that credit was too available. Right now, the current rise in house prices is reflected because of strong demand and tight supply. So it's supply and demand. It isn't just because anybody can get a house and you have this unrealistic number of the mortgage payment that you have to pay. Now, with this strong demand and that tight supply, it is being helped with the mortgage industry from record low interest rates. But these are true low interest rates, fixed rate mortgages, not these designer mortgages that they were giving out in the early 2000s, where your payment would keep going up and up and up and interest would be thrown on the back end of your loan. So Nathaniel Karp, he's a chief U.S. economist at BBVA, one of those credit card companies. This housing market is in line with fundamentals. That's really important. It's not a crazy lunatic market out there. It's based in fundamentals, and these interest rates are so attractive still, and incomes are high due to fiscal stimulus because, you know, everybody got a check for a couple of times. But that makes the debt servicing relatively affordable and allows buyers to qualify for larger mortgages, but realistically and authentically qualify for a larger mortgage. So underwriting standards, that's really important, are still very strong. Loans are only being given to people who can actually afford them. There's little risk of this bubble developing. And Bill McBride of Calculated Risk says, it's not clear at all to me that things are going to slow down significantly in the near future. But in 2005, he had a strong sense that the hot market would turn, and that when it turned, things would get very ugly. And believe me, if you lived through that time and you did own real estate and you bought recently, you know how ugly that turned. But today, he says, I don't have that sense at all because all of the fundamentals are there. Demand is going to continue to be high for a while because millennials need houses. And this is another component that nobody's really talking about, is that the millennials have entered the market where they weren't entering before. So not only do we have a shortage of inventory, we have an increase in buyers. So we need more inventory, and that's happening, but prices will keep rising for a while because this inventory is so low. So Mark Fleming, the chief economist at First American, said, looking back at the bubble years in those early 2000s, house prices exceeded house buying power. So I want to make that really clear. Because the lending industry allowed anybody to get a loan, even though they didn't technically qualify for it because they had a small starting payment, that's what caused the house buying power to get completely out of whack. But today, house buying power is nearly twice as high as the median sales price nationally. So many are finding it hard to believe, but housing is actually undervalued in most markets. I know, wrap your head around that. But the fact is that the gap between house buying power and sales prices indicates there's room for further house price growth in the months to come. Because it's just an attrition. And just like everything else in the world, inflation is coming into play to a certain extent. So the bottom line is, as all four strongly believe, that we are not in a bubble. I repeat, we are not in a bubble, and we won't see crashing home values as we did in 2008. But these guys are not alone. Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, they all share the same opinion. So what that says for you is, don't be afraid to buy a house now. Those prices are going to stay even for a long time to come, and we're not going to have the bubble and the crash. We're going to have a little tapering off. It's a great time to buy. It's a great time to sell. And as I always say, y'all come back now, you hear?